Hi everyone, this is Hannah Mossing. Today I'm going to discuss chapters 13 through 16 of Invisible Man. This section of reading was really deeply symbolic and had rich imagery and was a really compelling section. I'm going to try to discuss all of the important details within these chapters, but I'm sure I'm going to miss a few things, so I really look forward to our discussions over this section of reading. So for just a brief overview of what I'm going to discuss, I'm going to go over chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. I'm going to discuss Mary, Brother Jack, and the Brotherhood as a unit, analyzing some symbols and motifs, and then sharing some discussion questions. So chapter 13 picks up right where chapter 12 left off. If you forget, chapter 12 ends with Invisible Man discussing how he's feeling homesick and winter has approached. So chapter 13 opens with Invisible Man feeling really restless. And Ellison does a really great job at creating these really vivid images about being hot and being cold. So we're seeing Invisible Man burning with this inner fever. He's feeling really restless, really hot, but the outside, the snow is freezing cold. While he's walking in the cold, trying to calm himself down, trying to calm down that heat, he actually comes across a shop that makes him more angry. So the shop has some offensive images, and when he looks into the shop and sees these images, these items, he's burning with even more rage. He continues walking in the snow or in the snowy winter, and he comes across this man who's selling yams, and he reflects on the fact that he would eat yams when he was younger. They're nostalgic, and he decides to buy one. Once he bites into this yam, he's suddenly overcome by an intense feeling of freedom. And I'm going to discuss the yams as a symbol a little bit later on. But what seems like something really insignificant, a yam, proves to be really meaningful. And his reflections on eating yams span several pages. So while he's eating the yams, he thinks about his own identity as a Southerner and accepting that, but he also thinks about how people are embarrassed by the things they like and embarrassed by who they are and how they shouldn't be embarrassed by that. And he goes back and he gets more yams from the man and showing this acceptance of his identity, which really shows his growth from the beginning of him moving to New York when he was trying to distance himself from this Southern identity. After he eats his yam, almost immediately he's tested with this acceptance of his identity. He runs into an older couple who is being evicted. And this older couple reminds him of himself. They remind him of his Southern roots. And he's really upset when he sees them being evicted. All of their items are splayed outside of their apartment. And he's looking at their items and the things that belong to them. And he's just getting more angry while he watches this injustice. Other people are around and they're also angry. They're saying things, they're yelling things. And in an effort to almost control the crowd, he gives this speech, which is really effective. And this idea of this speech is to kind of control their anger and put it towards something that is useful and that can actually help this couple. The cops arrive during this, and he runs from the police, or who he thinks is the police. Once he finally is away from them and he feels safe, he meets Brother Jack, who seems to materialize out of thin air, for a lack of a better word. Brother Jack tells him that he had a great speech and asks to speak with him and have a conversation. An Invisible Man doesn't seem to fully trust Brother Jack. He recognizes that Brother Jack is a seedy character, and Brother Jack tries to persuade him to join his organization, the Brotherhood, but Invisible Man declines. It's a little unsettling because Brother Jack seems to just know that it's inevitable that Invisible Man will join. He says, "Call me when you're ready." Doesn't necessarily take no for an answer. Chapter 14 starts with Invisible Man entering Mary's apartment, and he smells cabbage, and it reminds him of his childhood when his parents were low on money, and he realizes that Mary probably also is struggling with money because he's been using her and not paying her rent. He's feeling really horrible about himself and how he's acting like a kid rather than a man. He says, perhaps I'd never really seen her. I'd been acting like a child, not like a man. So this moment where he seems to be growing in his identity and attempting to become a man, attempting to realize who he truly is, reach this self-actualization. But we'll see later on that he's not really there yet. So in order to repay his debt, he decides that he will work for Brother Jack. So you see that Brother Jack was right. It was inevitable. He is going to call Brother Jack. He calls Brother Jack and asks to meet him, and they attend a party together with other members of the Brotherhood. This party is kind of like a networking event for the Brotherhood. And at the party, the members discuss Invisible Man's usefulness and treat him as if he is an object or a resource, specifically because of his race. One woman even comments, like, is he black enough? And he seems to really just be an object that represents the black experience in their mind rather than an individual. They tell him that he has the potential to be the next Booker T. Washington, which he doesn't love, and he decides that he'd rather be like the founder. And then he ends the party and he goes back to Mary's apartment, but Brother Jack told him that he could not stay there any longer and that he had to basically dissolve his old identity, his old name, leave everything behind when joining the Brotherhood, which feels almost culty. Chapter 15 starts with Invisible Man waking up to annoying noises. His plan was to leave without waking up Mary so he didn't have to face her, but he wakes up to these annoying noises from his neighbors and he immediately is in a panic. And the images that Ellison uses while he's waking up and the sounds that he's hearing are really vivid and help kind of create this frantic feeling in the reader. So Invisible Man wants to quickly leave Mary's apartment so he doesn't have to face her and doesn't have to say goodbye. And so he can get his instructions from Brother Jack. But because of the annoying neighbors, his plans are derailed. While he's frantically trying to get his stuff together, he notices this coin bank that Mary has, and it's offensive and shaped like a black man. And he's immediately enraged, and it's almost like an inherent reaction. He breaks it. And Mary hears him breaking it. She hears the neighbors yelling, so she comes over to see what the commotion is. He's panicking. He doesn't want Mary to see the broken object. He doesn't want to leave it behind. He's trying to figure out what to do with it. And he throws it into his suitcase. Once he comes out of his room, they have breakfast together, and he gives Mary $100. Brother Jack gave him $300 for starting the job. Mary says that she'll use what she needs and then keep the rest of it for Invisible Man. So we're seeing her generosity still and how she cares for Invisible Man, but she doesn't really realize that he's planning to leave and not come back. So she is going to have those $100. She won't use them for him. After he leaves and he's on his way to Brother Jack, he tries to get rid of the coin bank that is in his briefcase, and his plans keep getting thwarted. So he attempts to throw it out in the trash, and a woman calls him the N-word and screams at him and tells him to get it out of her trash. He makes a comment about how he didn't know that there were certain levels of trash, that trash could be better than one another, and he has to dig this object out of the trash. There's some really gross images with that one. And then he puts it back in his briefcase. He tries to drop the package in the snow. A man attempting to be helpful brings the package to him. And when Invisible Man says that he meant to drop it off, the man thinks that it could potentially be a weapon and yells at Invisible Man. So Invisible Man has to keep it in his briefcase and says that he'll get rid of it later, but he doesn't actually do that. Chapter 16 is really significant. So this is his first rally with the Brotherhood and when he gives his speech. So he reflects a lot in this chapter about how he's in a new phase. He's a new person. He has a new suit. There's all this newness. He says that once he begins speaking at the rally, he'll become someone else. Once he stands in front of the audience to give his speech, he's blinded by the lights and he's disoriented. He starts off his speech a little rocky, but then he eventually delivers an effective speech about the uncommon man and blindness, which I'll talk about later, is rather ironic considering the fact that he's blinded by the lights when he's giving this speech. The Brotherhood has mixed reviews about his speech. Brother Jack is impressed with it, but several of the members believe it wasn't scientific enough and that it could perhaps contribute to a mob mentality, which Brother Jack is not worried about. Brother Jack decides that he needs to meet with Brother Hambro to work on his speeches, who we have not yet met. So for important characters in this section, Mary is an important character. We met her in the earlier section, but she has an even more important role, I believe, in this section. So we really see her as a mother figure to Invisible Man. And she helps him accept his identity as a Southerner and help him reach this stage of feeling comfortable with himself and acceptance, even though we see him regress after joining the Brotherhood. It's interesting because Invisible Man has really conflicting feelings about Mary, so he appreciates her and respects her. She is this mother figure. She's kind and warm, but she also really annoys him. So when he decides to leave her home, it's a difficult one for him, but he also comforts himself with the fact that she annoys him at times. This quote that I pulled from page 316 I thought was really compelling. So he says, "There are many things about people like Mary that I dislike. For one thing, they seldom know where their personalities end and yours begin. They usually think in terms of we, while I have always tended to think in terms of me." I thought this was really ironic because he is saying about how he thinks in the terms of I and not the group like Mary does, but he's joining the Brotherhood, which is the we, the group. So ironically, he's just joining another we by leaving Mary and the community that she creates for him. When he's deciding that he doesn't want to have to face her, when he tells her that he is leaving, why can't I just tell her that I'm leaving and pay her and go on off? She was a landlady, I was a tenant. There was more to it, sorry. So you're seeing this conflicting emotion. He doesn't want to just leave her, he cares about her. A new character that we meet is Brother Jack, and he's a really interesting character. So we first meet him in chapter 13 once he appears behind Invisible Man and talks about his eviction speech. We find out that Brother Jack was the one that was chasing him, not the police, which makes him even more sinister, in my opinion. So he asks him to have the conversation about joining the Brotherhood and the job opportunity, and Invisible Man seems rather hesitant. He understands that Brother Jack is a little suspicious. He mentions, "I had a feeling that somehow he was acting a part, that something about him wasn't quite real." And as we continue in the following chapters, we see that Brother Jack really is just using Invisible Man and sees him as an object and not an individual. Invisible Man himself recognizes this. He said, "He only wanted to use me for something. Everybody wanted to use you for some purpose. Why should he want me as a speaker?" So recognizing that Brother Jack is using him. And during Invisible Man's speech at the rally, Brother Jack kind of pretends to adjust Invisible Man's microphone. And while he's doing it, he says, "Don't end your usefulness before you've begun." So Invisible Man is starting to speak more about what he actually cares about and his true self. And Brother Jack stops him. And this moment is, I think, a perfect moment for showing how Brother Jack is using him and doesn't actually care about him as the individual. So my next character isn't really a character, but I think the way that Ellison creates the Brotherhood is really interesting. So the Brotherhood operates as a collective unit, so almost a singular character. It's hard to pick out any other members and remember them as anything really memorable besides Brother Jack. Brother Jack stands out just because he's the leader and the things that he does to convince Invisible Man and how he speaks to Invisible Man. But the other characters, they really feel interchangeable. So this idea that they're all one collective unit, they're all the we, and losing their own identities. So the Brotherhood really shows this danger of ideologies in losing your identity. Some quotes that I pulled about the Brotherhood. So sometimes the difference between individual and organized indignation is the difference between criminal and political action. Brother Jack says this to him when he's first trying to convince him to join the Brotherhood. So we're seeing the difference between individual and group and what can get done. Emma, who is Brother Jack's mistress, says, "They chew them up and spit them out. Their leaders are made, not born. Then they're destroyed," which I thought was really interesting. She says this during the party. So potentially some foreshadowing here, because Brother Jack is trying to make Invisible Man into a leader, so Invisible Man not being born a leader, But then this idea that Brother Jack could be potentially chewing him up and spitting him out, destroying him because he's not using him because of his individual self and rather using him as an object for his own gain. Invisible Man seems to recognize that the Brotherhood is using him. When the woman makes a comment about him not being black enough, he says, "What was I, a man or a natural resource?" And when Brother Jack tells him that he needs to leave everything behind, he says, "Our discipline demands, therefore, that we talk to no one and that we avoid situations in which information might be given away." So he's being distanced from Mary, from someone he cares about, from someone who connects him to his self and his identity, and losing that by joining the Brotherhood. For symbols, the first symbol I want to discuss were the yams. So the yams are really symbolic. At the start of his New York journey, Invisible Man shows his embarrassment towards his Southern culture, first with the vet and Crenshaw, but then also when he's at the cafe and the waiter tries to give him a traditional or suggests a traditional Southern breakfast, and Invisible Man is offended that he assumes that he's Southern. So this moment where he eats the yams and embraces his Southern culture, this nostalgia, how he grew up, shows his acceptance of his heritage and the freedom that he feels in this moment when he finally accepts himself. So, for these important quotes, while he's reflecting, he says, "You could cause us the greatest humiliation simply by confronting us with something we liked." So, talking about how people are embarrassed by the things we like. So, he's embarrassed by liking the yams, and the yams are symbolic, right, of his Southern culture. While he's eating the yams, he says, "I am what I am." So, this idea that he's accepting himself finally, he's finding himself. He reflects, what and how much had I lost by trying to do only what was expected of me instead of what I myself had wished to do? So, this idea that he was trying to perform for others, which really, when you think about him in his college years, this shows a lot of growth from that moment. The last line that Ellison uses, though, once he finishes the yams, I think is really interesting and symbolic. So, "An unpleasant taste bloomed in my mouth now as I bit the end of the yam and threw it into the street. It had been frostbitten." So, he has this really wonderful moment with the yams where he finds himself and he's embracing his identity, but then the last bite is frostbitten. So, this kind of bitter moment, right? And I think this could be potential foreshadowing to him embracing his culture with the yams, but then losing it again with the Brotherhood. So this idea that the Brotherhood is the frostbite. Another symbol is the coin bank, which I mentioned earlier. So he hates this coin bank. He immediately destroys it, and he doesn't want Mary to find it. He even tries to reflect if possibly Mary didn't actually own this, someone else owned it. He really hates the image that it portrays. So even though he's trying to get rid of it, destroy it, he can't escape it. So he tries to hide it in Mary's first, and there's nowhere to hide it. Then he tries to throw it out, and he's verbally harassed by that woman who calls him the N-word. Then he tries to drop it, and the person tries to help him back. So it's showing that this coin bank is really just constantly appearing. He can't get rid of it. And it ends up in his briefcase, and he forgets about it, at least through chapter 16. So this coin bank represents the negative stereotypes and the prejudice that surround Black Americans, and the fact that Invisible Man is unable to escape these stereotypes and prejudice. So the quotes I pulled for this: "Where would I hide it, I wondered, looking with profound distaste at the iron kinks, the dull red piece of a grinning lip. Why, I thought with anguish, would Mary have something like this around anyway?" So I thought this quote really showed the pain that he feels when he sees this, when he sees these stereotypes as prejudice. I really like the line, "the dull red piece of a grinning lip," almost like it's mocking him still. So it's still following him around. He can't escape it. This goes along with the briefcase symbol, which I'll talk about in the next slide, but I could feel the briefcase swinging against my leg from the weight of the package, and I determined to get rid of the coins and broken iron at the first ash can. The, sorry, the weight of the package I thought was really interesting. So not only is it physically heavy, but also metaphorically heavy, the weight of the stereotypes and the prejudice weighing on him emotionally. And then I would get rid of the package later. Right now, I had to think about tonight's rally. So he's still attempting to get rid of it, but then he forgets about it because he's focusing on the rally with the Brotherhood. And honestly continuing on with these negative stereotypes because he is losing himself and becoming a black figurehead, essentially. The briefcase symbol, we see it again. So he first got it with the Battle Royal. This time he is going to place the broken coin bank in the briefcase, and this represents him literally and figuratively carrying the baggage of the coin bank. Again, the coin bank representing prejudice and discrimination. So I got down my prized briefcase from the closet. It was still as new as the night of the Battle Royal, and sagged now as I placed the smash bank and coins inside and locked the flap. I thought the word sagged now is interesting. So this idea that the briefcase, which is supposed to be as new as the night that he got it, is sagging from the weight of this discrimination as well. And then he said, my briefcase with the broken image lay on the table. I'd get rid of the package later. So again, he's still carrying in his briefcase. He's not escaping it. He's still carrying this baggage around. The last thing I wanted to discuss was the motif of blindness, which Ellison uses throughout these chapters, but really significantly in chapter 16 with Invisible Man's speech. So Invisible Man is literally blinded while he's speaking from the lights, and he's figuratively blind to the fact that he's being used. So he, to a point, recognizes that the Brotherhood is using him, but not to the full extent of how they're using him. And his entire speech is on this blindness, which is ironic because he is blind while he's giving it. So he says, I could see rows of blurred faces, then suddenly I was blinded and felt myself crash in the man ahead of me. This is when he's first walking in. It was as though a semi-transparent curtain had dropped between us, but through which they could see me, for they are applauding without themselves being seen. The semi-transparent curtain is a really interesting image and reminded me of the discussion of the founder's veil, right? So the curtain, the veil. So there's something separating him, blinding him from the audience. During his speech, he says, we're a nation of one-eyed mice. Did you ever see such a sight in your life? So calling them all blind, right? So they're partially aware, one-eyed of what's going on, but not to the full picture. Again, ironic because he seems to be one-eyed himself, even while giving the speech. At the end of his speech, he says, let's take back our pillaged eyes. Let's reclaim our sight. Let's combine and spread our vision. So this blindness imagery, so spreading the vision, reclaiming the sight, even while he himself is still blind. So for discussion questions, I came up with 4 of them. There were a lot of ideas I had for these, so I limited myself to 4 because there's so many interesting things to talk about with this section. So my first one is, while at the Brotherhood party, a man is scolded for asking Invisible Man to sing. On page 314, he reflects, something disturbed me. Shouldn't there be some way for us to be asked to sing? Shouldn't the short man have the right to make a mistake without his motives being considered consciously and unconsciously malicious? Why is this reflection significant? What does this quote demonstrate about the Brotherhood and their ideals? 2, ideas surrounding identity are developed throughout the novel. When the Brotherhood declares Invisible Man the new Booker T. Washington, he comments that, I would do the work, but I would be no one except myself, whoever I was. I would pattern my life on that of the founder. How is that statement ironic? What does that reveal about Invisible Man's grasp of his own identity? Invisible Man's speech at the Brotherhood rally parallels Homer Barbie's speech about the founder. How are these speeches similar and different? What does Ellison demonstrate about Invisible Man through this speech? And finally, on page 354, Invisible Man writes, what had I meant by saying that I had become more human? Was it a phrase that I had picked up from some preceding speaker or a slip of the tongue? For a moment, I thought of my grandfather and quickly dismissed him. What is the significance of this question alongside the memory of his grandfather? I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say on the discussion.